This is Change is Possible podcast, and I'm your host, Ani Filipova. There is always a time in your career when you feel stuck, uninspired, and you're looking for a change. That's why I created this podcast, to help you make your career change possible. Each of our guests has made a successful career change, and we are going to discuss practical advice, actionable tips, and inspirational stories that can help you to get unstuck and transition into the work that you love. Let's tune in. Hi everyone, my guest today is Paul Mcveigh. He started his career in football and became a Premier League and international football player for Tottenham Hotspur, Norwich City and Northern Ireland. Paul competed with and against the best players in the world on a daily basis, and this is what shaped his methodology of high performance. He has a unique combination of reaching the pinnacle of elite sport as well as being the first Premier League footballer to qualify with a master degree in psychology. He dedicated his career to understanding what makes humans tick and how it affects how they think, feel, and act. Paul specializes in implementing the mental tools required to elevate the performance of leaders and teams from organizations across the world, especially in financial services, technology, and the professional service industry. He has recently worked with PwC, Aviva, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, NatWest, Microsoft, Cisco, and many, many more. Paul is also an established broadcaster on TV and radio and is a published author. Hi, Paul. I'm so excited to welcome you on the podcast today. How are you?
Very well. Thanks, Annie. Great to see you on here.
Great. So let's start with the questions. First thing I want to know, you grew up in Northern Ireland in quite a turbulent times. It lasted, this so-called low-level war lasted 30 years. And this is the time when you grew up. So what it was to grow up and how this formed you to become the person who you are today?
A really difficult question to answer because when I was growing up in Belfast in the 1970s and 80s and 90s before I left in 1994 to join Tottenham Hotspur, there was, as you said, there was a civil war going on and there were tanks driving down my street. There were soldiers walking past me as I was going to school every day with their rifles holding up high and pointing at you as you walk by. And there were bombs going off nearly on a daily basis. And that was just normal for me growing up and for everyone else in that environment. And you don't realize the impact that it has on you. And it's only when I come over to England in the mid-90s that I realized that it wasn't normal for tanks to drive down your street and for bombs to be going off every day. And it's only when you look back and reflect and realize that it was normal for me, it just wasn't normal in the world.
I see. And how did you get introduced to football? Is this something that runs in your family? How did it happen that you started to play the game?
Don't think it ran in the family. It was more to do with that I grew up in a working-class background. And normally in a working-class background, what happens is the parents, or in my case, my mum, was at home, and when we went to school and we came back and she made sure we had our homework done. And as soon as you'd finished your schoolwork for the day, then you just went outside into the street and just played with other kids in the street. And what do you do when you're a kid? Normally someone has a ball and there could be two of us playing or there could be 32 of us playing. And it was just a very, very simple, cheap, fun way of really enjoying yourself as a kid. And fortunately, I managed to take that, which is essentially a hobby, something I like doing with all my friends before school, after school, in the evening times, and was very fortunate to go on and have a 20-year professional career, basically doing something that I loved and would do for free anyway.
And apart from, obviously, physical strength, endurance, the ability to play the game, what other qualities did this career taught you? What football taught you?
There are so many lessons. I don't think in the 30 minutes we have together I'll be able to share all of them. But the biggest thing that I would say, it was all about understanding that to be a successful player, to be as part of a successful team, that it wasn't really about the technical or the physical skills or attributes. Actually, the most important thing that I felt that football gave me and what sport gives lots of people around the world is that desire to win, that competitiveness, the dedication to want to get better, the ability to communicate within a team, to be able to work towards a common goal, to have the resilience to get over all of the setbacks you get, and you get, lots and lots of setbacks, whether it's on an individual basis, on a team basis, or even on a minute by minute in the game, or week by week as you win and lose games as you go through the season. So there are countless numbers of benefits of being part of that team. And as I said, it just kept getting better and better and improved all those qualities. So when you look at the leaders of today, what do they need to have? Well, they need to be focused. They need to have the belief that they're capable of doing it. They need to have the empathy and understanding of what your team's going through. They need to have the focus that this is where we're going. They need to have the ability to set goals. They need to have the ability to achieve goals. Honestly, the similarities and the way that you can transpose the lessons from sport into the business world, not just today and over the last 12 years that I've been working in the corporate world, delivering leadership programs, because essentially all the qualities of being successful in professional football are exactly what you need to be successful in the corporate world.
And how did you decide to go to psychology? What was that thing that moved you to psychology? And you said, oh, that's an interesting field. I want to study this.
It's a really good question, because I had no interest in it whenever I first started this whole journey of professional football. And so, for example, in 1994, my first day at Tottenham Hotspur, I got to train and meet a gentleman called Jurgen Klinsmann. And if anyone doesn't know Jurgen Klinsmann, he was a World Cup winning German international footballer.
I know.
Now, to be able to play and train with a World Cup winner on your first day, it just completely blew my mind, because I'm thinking, how am I, as a 16-year-old kid, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had this huge inferiority complex. I just didn't think I was good enough. And I didn't think it was good enough, not because people kept telling, just because I had this inbuilt, what if I can't do this? What if I get exposed? What happens if I'm not really as good as what maybe people think I am? And to have that magnified on the first day of meeting Jurgen Klinsmann, and that inferiority complex stayed with me over a number of years. And what actually happened was I was given a book. And again, this just shows the power of education, the importance of reading and educating yourself. And whenever I was given this book, it was all around personal development. And I remember reading it at 17, and it was like someone had just completely taken the blinkers off me of what I thought was possible. And suddenly I started to think, actually, what if I could do that? What do I need to have or believe about myself that would allow me to get to anywhere near Jurgen Klinsmann's level or a professional level? Because all I wanted to do was be a professional in the Premier League and be an international footballer for Northern Ireland. And to be able to understand that the only thing that was holding me back from stopping me achieving my dreams was me. And actually, more specifically, it was my psychology and mindset. And so from that day forward, from the age of 17 and all the way through to today, it's 44. I know I look like a 12-year-old, but actually, nearly 30 years later, it's still been the number one thing that I work on every single day, because I realized a long, long time ago that the only thing I ever need to develop in my life is my mindset and psychology. Because if I get that right, every other part of my life falls into place.
No, that's amazing. And you realized this quite early in your life, and that's a big bonus. Did you study while you were playing, or after that? How did it develop?
Both, really. And because it was a case of, there was a formal education and an informal education. And again, reading this book at 17, I suddenly thought, okay, so maybe I need to start taking more control over me and my life and my destiny, instead of thinking we just end up going down a path and life will throw certain things at you. The whole book and the whole essence of personal development is essentially to say, what do you want to achieve? How do you want to live your life? How do you want to be? What kind of things do you want to have? All of these things that maybe I wasn't really thinking about, and maybe just broaden this out into anyone who's listening or watching this today. Do people really think about what they want in their life? And because I've been working in this corporate world for the last 12, 13 years, the amount of times I ask that simple, basic question of, what do you want? And the amount of people that are just, don't know, not really sure. I haven't fully decided what I want in life. And it's not for me to judge people to say, well, you should know what you want. It's more for me as an observer to really say, if I have no idea where I'm going to end up in life, if that's what I want, or if that's okay with me, then that's great. I just know the way that I've done it. So in terms of the education side, I started reading lots of books. I started seeing a sports psychologist. I started understanding more. I started doing my degree. I then went through this entire 20-year professional career, came out the other side and realized that actually the psychology was the most important reason why I could have that long-term career in such a highly competitive and ultimately ruthless environment. And then to come out of that and think, okay, what else do I think I need to be able to go and share this in a corporate world? So I went and did my master's in psychology just because I wanted the academic underpinning to come alongside all of the tacit learning and all that experiential knowledge that I'd picked up of getting to, the pinnacle of what is, as I said, the number one sport in the world.
You're absolutely right. If you don't know where you're going, how can you choose the best means to go there? You can't, right? Because you don't know the goal. You just pursue different things, and at the end of the day, you don't get where you want to be, and you're not happy. You wrote a book also, right? It's very interesting. The Stupid Footballer is Dead. That's an interesting title. Tell us about the book.
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is that I had the title. I'd already decided on the title when I was 21. Interestingly, it was a bit like, because I'd read this book, that just sparked off all these ideas of thinking, not just about where you are today, where do you want to be in 5 years? And for me, that would have been still in the middle of my professional football career. What about 10 years? I was thinking, well, maybe when I'm 31, hopefully I'll still be in the middle of my footballing career. What about 20, 30, when you're 60, 70, 80? All these things, how do you want to be? What way do you want to be living your life? And I'd already realized that I wanted to write a book. I just didn't know how I was going to write a book or what I was going to write it on, but I knew that the title had to be The Stupid Footballer is Dead, because the perception of professional footballers around the world is, it's pretty unfair that most people think just because you're good at a sport or good at football that you don't really have many brains or you're not particularly clever or bright. I actually think it's not true, because the amount of players, the amount of people I've met in professional football who are so astute, they are so switched on. And what I mean by that is they're incredibly good at reading people. And you take one of the greatest skills you can have in the corporate world, and that's people skills. It's all well and good being able to technically do the job. It's all well and good, be able to have the network to be able to reach out if you need to. But people skills is probably the single greatest attribute that any leader can have. And whenever you are a professional footballer, people just come to you. They swarm around you. It's almost like flies round honey, because they just want to get something off that footballer. So a professional footballer is constantly getting people coming up to them, asking them for things, work out very quickly, is that person genuine or are they just on the take? So when you think that actually they're not stupid at all, and I wanted to change this perception that all footballers are stupid, which is why I did my degree, why I then started studying Italian, why I went and did my master's, why I worked as a sports psychologist, why I then wrote a book, why I then became a keynote speaker, why I then delivered leadership programs around the world. All of these things I am doing because I want to keep knocking down this myth that footballers aren't particularly bright, because I know they are.
These are biases. We'll talk about this a bit later, but let's talk about your career and your business. So you are specializing in mental tools required to elevate the performance of leaders and teams. That's an amazing topic. And I see you have clients like Microsoft, PwC, Aviva, Barclays. Tell us about the method you're teaching and how did you come to this method? How did you develop it?
Well, it was really interesting, because whenever I was going through my playing side of my career for those 20 years, I was getting frameworks that I used put in place for me. Now, really, really simple things about, in terms of preparation, how do I need to prepare for this event and this really high performance event in front of, 30, 40, 50, 60,000, 70,000 people sometimes? How do I then go out and perform and execute it? How do I then analyze my performance and debrief So you're on this continuous cycle of improvement and never stop in that process, which is such an important aspect of what a professional athlete does. But not only did I have that experience of doing it, and this is where I feel I can offer a real USP, because in my experience, there's a performance spectrum of really high performance, elite performers, and some people will get to that just by doing it. For example, I don't know, someone like Richard Branson. He didn't study business. He didn't do particularly well at school. He's just started business after business after business, and he knows how to be a top performer in the business world just by doing it. That's called tacit knowledge and experiential learning. The other end of the spectrum is people don't go and start businesses, but they study business studies. They do their MBAs, they get their PhDs and all of these different subjects related to business. So they could tell you about the theory and what you should be doing, but they've never actually done it themselves. So you have this real dichotomy of, have you actually done it? Do you understand the framework of being able to do it? And that's why I feel very fortunate that because I've actually gone and done something like play in the Premier League, score against Manchester United, play internationally against Spain and Italy and all these teams. But the other end is then going and learning and studying the academic framework. And because I have this really unique proposition and offering to be able to share that with these companies, as you mentioned, your Deutsche Banks, your Barclays and Cisco's and all these companies that I've worked with over the years, it's because they see real value of, first of all, is there lessons from sport? Absolutely. Are there people from a footballing background doing this? Not really. I was the first keynote speaker from the world of professional football, which I just can't believe that, because there are so many keynote speakers from athletics and rugby and people who have climbed Everest. Number one sport in the world. No one had ever done it before. So I just saw a massive gap in the market. I know people are engaged in the sport, but very quickly I take it from, oh, do you remember me playing against Cristiano Ronaldo? To suddenly, how does this affect you and your day job and how you live your life? Because then when you understand how someone's living their life, you can understand how that improves their professional life, because essentially both aspects of someone's life are interlinked. So if you can improve them personally, normally improves them professionally. Or if you can improve them professionally, it normally impacts their personal life too.
It's an amazing transformation from a footballer to a keynote speaker. Absolutely. And as you said, there are no keynote speakers who are footballers. And that's, when you said it, I started thinking, and yes, that's absolutely true. And I don't know why not more people speak about it, because the experience is amazing, as you just said. And when you build a business, you have to build the client base. And you were just talking about biases against footballers. So how did you overcome that? You go to all these companies, even banks, and say, well, I'll teach you. And how did they respond to that? What were your experiences? What kind of qualities you needed to use to prove that you have a great proposition?
Really good question. Really, really good question. Because essentially, lots of the work that I do is about delivering leadership programs over a long-term basis. Because again, that's evolved from when I started this in 2010. Because I used to deliver just one-off keynote speeches, and I would have the same feedback every time. People would say, Paul, people seem to really love that. They're entertained, they're engaged. But what's next? And my answer would always be the same. I don't really have, I could do the same speech for another audience. So I didn't really have enough of an offering to be able to develop and improve them on a long-term basis. And then once I started working as a sports psychologist with 2 Premier League clubs over the 7 years, I needed to build up a curriculum season after season, because I was working with the same players and you can't deliver the same session twice. So I ended up working with one of the Premier League clubs for 5 years. So I built a 5-year curriculum. And what that helped me understand was that whenever I go into the corporate world, I can take this curriculum and say, start off with this subject and develop it and improve it and pass the accountability over to the team so that they start working on it, so they can start bringing it throughout the organization. So then you have this drip feeding effect through not just the people you're working with, but also the people that they then work with. So now whenever I go and speak to an organization, if anyone ever asks me what I do, I just say, I'm just a salesman. And they say, well, what do you sell? And I'm like, leadership programs. So it just happens to be that I will deliver some of the programs myself. But actually what I also do now, and again, because I realized it can't be just about the amount of knowledge that I have inside me. Because let's be honest, I only have this much knowledge in the whole world of all of the high performers out there. So I started looking into my network and thinking, well, what about these guys from rugby who've won World Cups and have won Grand Slams? Can I bring them in so they can share their knowledge? What about one of my friends has done probably one of the greatest triathlons ever? He's climbed Everest. He single-handedly rowed the Atlantic Ocean and he cycled around the world. It's the most ridiculously tough triathlon you could do. I think, well, what can people learn from that? Well, they could do that. What about another friend of mine who's a 10-time para canoe world champion? This female woman who's just an absolute superstar. So what can they learn from the challenge she's gone through her life, how she's then become a world champion 10 times in a row, all the way through to some of the people I work with are like group MDs of companies that are the 12th biggest on the FTSE 100. Because then it's not just about my experience, it's about bringing all of the lessons from sport, business, military, exploring, whatever it is, and then be able to say, okay, what does your organization need? And let us design a program that's going to fill the gaps that you don't have.
What was the most difficult experience in that transition from professional football to business?
Really good question, because it was something that I'd already overcome with my own playing days. So I touched on earlier how I had this inferiority complex. I simply didn't believe that someone like me, growing up in Belfast, I'm only 5'6", so I was always the smallest player in the team. Someone like me could play in the Premier League. But once the experience that I had was I saw my friend at 19 years old. We were both 19. He was playing in the first team. He made his debut against Manchester United live on Sky Sports at White Hart Lane at Hotspur's old stadium. And he scored against that amazing Manchester United team of the late 90s of David Beckham and Paul Scholes and Ryan Giggs and all these amazing players. And when I saw my friend score, I was so excited for him and seeing my mate score against Manchester United. But it was like a switch was flipped in my brain, because it was like I saw him score, and it was, from my belief, I thought, well, if he can do that, then I can too. And within 3 months, I had made my debut in the Premier League, and then I had scored my first goal in the Premier League in front of 40,000 fans at White Hart Lane. So that same experience, then when I came out of professional football, you asked what was the biggest challenge? Well, the biggest challenge was, how do I have the same kind of belief that I'm capable of doing these amazing things in the corporate world? And I just didn't have it, because I went straight back to the first step, and I didn't believe that anyone would pay any money at all for me to go and speak to their organization. But what I do, I'm really good at developing myself, trying to be aware of what I need. And I knew I needed to learn how to be a keynote speaker. So I invested in myself. I went off to America, learned from a guy who was delivering a keynote speaking course, came back. And then I had my first challenge, and I got my first event with Aviva. And they said, tell us what your fee is. And I had no idea. I had no belief in myself and had no idea what to charge. But I thought there was some sort of figure, maybe around about £3,000, that people might charge for being a keynote speaker. And so I remember emailing the person saying I charged £3,000 for my 45-minute keynote. And that was probably more than I'd earned in 80% of my professional footballing career for a week. And I was getting that in 45 minutes. And I emailed them, and I was so nervous. And whenever I sent the email, I'm sitting there going, oh, they're going to laugh at me. They're going to tell me to go away. They don't want to use me. And the guy emailed me back 30 minutes later. Brilliant. We'll see you next week. And that was the first little bit of reinforcement that I was actually worth sharing my experiences of professional football. So in 2010, that was my starting point. And as it's gone over the last 12 years, every year that goes by, I feel like I get better. I feel like I should improve, and I'm also increase my fees. So again, that's moving up and keeping moving the dial. But the biggest thing for me was, how do I go from just deliver a one-off session, whereas now, whenever we're going in to pitch for business, we're going in and saying, I'm not just going to do a one-off session. I'm going to go in and develop your senior leadership team of this organization that's worth $1 billion, $4 billion, $40 billion, whatever it is. And we're going to deliver this over a 12-month period. But by the way, it's going to cost you 6 figures. So are you happy to pay that? Because whenever people then start seeing the value that you place on yourself, they then have more confidence and belief that you're able to deliver that.
Absolutely. So you just have to start it. And then once you start it, you start learning and new horizons open in front of you and you start thinking of other ideas. And this is how it becomes a big thing. Well, we are at the end of the podcast. It was a great discussion, but let us end it with your 3 key recommendations and takeaways for people who want to make a big pivot in their career. What should they do? What should they think? How should they act?
I suppose that's a great way to end, because like anything, Annie, there's no point in me sharing my story and things that I've learned along the way if ultimately it doesn't help people. You know, the only reason why I deliver sessions is because people then can take things away from it so that they can apply it to their lives. I suppose the first thing I would say is, in my experience, most people are doing very, very little to consciously improve their mindset, their psychology. So I call it mental performance. But essentially, your thinking, your thought processes, most people don't consciously improve it. So if that means reading a book, going on a course, developing yourself in whatever way that is, consciously keep working on it, because that's the starting point. Whereas you will probably naturally improve over 10, 20, 30 years, but it's such a slow process rather than consciously and actively improving. So that's the first thing, actively improve your mental performance. The second thing I would really say is, when you understand that life doesn't happen to you, it's the meaning that you give all these different series of scenarios, outcomes, results in your life. That's probably one of the greatest things that I've learned. It's not what happens that's important, it's how you think about it. So actually being able to think about it in a way that, okay, you might have got the result, how can you improve on that? You might not have got the result you wanted, how can you learn from it, let it go, and move on very quickly. And that's, again, is a huge challenge, because when you get setbacks and things that really hold you back, that's a very challenging thing to do. And lastly, just be kind to yourself, because it's a really tough world for some people. Some people don't realize the challenges of people you meet on a daily basis, what they're going through in their own life, in their health, their family's health, their kids, all the challenges that are going around. So just be kind to yourself and others.
Great ending for the podcast, Paul. Thank you so much for being my guest, and I wish you all the best.
Pleasure, Annie. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. Please remember to review, rate and subscribe when you have a chance. You can do that on your favorite podcast platform or go to our site, changeispossible.site. Thank you once again and have a great day.